Hey everyone, welcome back to Sweet Yellow House. It's time for our weekly craft, and today I have 8 projects for you, so let's get started. Project 1 is vintage label tags, and I started out with some little wooden tags using the wood stain and some IOD transfers. And here again, in some of these projects, I'm just using up some on-end pieces or things that I feel like I want to use up that are just kind of laying around and I haven't found a project to use them on. So these little squares are actually from Michael's, and I believe I purchased them for Christmas. They have, you know, make your own ornament type thing. So these little wood balls here I got off of a garland that I purchased from Hobby Lobby, and I took that apart. That was probably a few years back. I purchased that for fall. So I stained all of those, as many as I wanted to, and then I coated them with Big Top, and I did 2 really good coats on this, thicker coats. The wood on this seemed to just kind of soak that in, so I did 2 really good coats. If I had to do it over again, I think I might have used the liquid patina. That seems a little bit thicker. So I did 2 coats with that and let them dry overnight, and then I began to apply the transfers on here. And like I said, I was having a little bit of difficulties getting them to stick, and it wasn't the Big Top. Like I said, I think it was just the wood on these just seemed to soak everything up. So I trimmed off the edges there just to make it easier to kind of pull back that edge, and then I didn't coat these. So I got some twine, and I just began to make little tags off there, putting one of those little wood beads, and top those off and tied them off, and there you go. That was a pretty easy project. I wanted to give these a nice look, so that way I can hang them on some of my bigger projects as kind of like a little side gift or something like that. Project 2 is a bottom half of like an apothecary jar. I broke the top of it, and I'm going to use again some odd and end leftover iron orchid transfers that I had laying around. So a lot of these, I just felt like I've had them in my stash for so long, it was time to get down to business and actually use them. So like I said, I broke the top of this, so I had the bottom laying around and decided to make a vase with that. Easy enough. You just put some transfers on there, and voila, you got a customized little frame. Customized little vase. Project 3 is a little French riser, and I've had this kind of like, I don't know, it's like a fake silver type cake plate. I've had this, I don't even know how long, for several years, probably upwards of 5 or 6 years. And so I just decided to give this a little makeover. So I painted this with the Jamie Ray Paint Blue, I believe it's called. This actually has a top coat in it, which was great. So the first coat I did, I just used the paint itself, and then the second and third coat that I did, I actually mixed that with some baking soda because I wanted to give it some texture. I didn't necessarily want this to be used as a cake plate. I wanted it to be used more for like a riser to hold your pretty, you know, perfume bottles or whatnots. So using the brocante transfer and the Redoubt too, didn't even see what that was. Some other transfers that I had, I decorated the top of this, and I didn't do a coat on this, like a coating, like a top coat, because the Paint Blue already has that top coat built into it, so it was easy enough to get those transfers on there. So I just cut it apart, the elements that I wanted, and began to transfer those down where I wanted them. This again was really a simple project, just quick and easy, but a big, you get a big result and something that would make a really lovely gift or just an addition to a vanity. So after I got the transfers where I wanted them, I am taking some white wax from DIY and I'm just going to do a coat of that all over top and bottom. Just to kind of seal everything in and smooth out any kind of texturing on there. I put it on and I wiped it back, and once I got that wiped back to where I wanted it, I took some DIY black wax or dark wax, and I am just going to take a small brush and I'm strategically putting that down, just kind of like in the bend areas around the high spots, just to kind of make it look aged. So I'm not really putting it everywhere, I'm just strategically putting that there. So I glued back on the bottom using my glue gun, and there it is. I'm not really a blue person, but I do like this blue color. It's very beautiful. Project 4 is what I'm calling some botanical plaques. I got these two little signs and they have this white ceramic insert. So I got these from Hobby Lobby and they were really high discounted, and I've had them a little bit, but not too long. So I think they were like almost just $4 a piece. So what I did was I removed all the kind of hardware from the back, and I'm taking that stain and I'm just staining the wood part of this because I want to darken that up. Once I got the stain done and I removed the tags, I'm taking some vintage linen DIY paint and I'm adding a little bit of water to that just to kind of thin it out just a little bit because it was really thick. But I am adding some baking soda to that because I do want some texture. I want it to kind of look like a like a slate, almost like a ceramic-y slate type of thing. So here you see me using some tape, but the tape did not want to stick to that wood, so I just gave up on it after a while and thought, I'll just wipe the paint off if I get it anywhere like I'm doing here. So once I got about 2 or 3 layers done with that white paint, I grabbed the new Melange paint inlay and some pieces from there, and I'm going to use that on top of these. I'm going to use the vintage linen straight paint and put on there to stick my inlays in. I do thin it out just a tad and put that all on top, and you can still see the texture even when I'm just putting the paint, just because there is a lot of texture on there from the layers before, and that's completely fine. That's exactly what I want. So I stick that down and press them down really well. I'm also going to use a paper towel and some water to kind of really push that down into the paint because I really want a good transfer on these. I really love that darker wood with the white. That's a look that I really do like. I'm not one of those people that likes a whole lot of white in my house, but with the darker wood, I just feel like it kind of really brings in that antique element to it. So once I let those dry overnight, I then go back and spray the top of that and pull those transfers off. I'm going to just clean up my edges here a little bit, which was easy enough. And then I'm going to grab my big top and some water And I'm using and I have that 50-50 mix in my spray bottle. I'm also just using this paintbrush. I'm not swiping. I'm just basically moving that around anywhere that I might have some little puddles of that. Once that's dry, I grab the Jolie finishing wax, and I'm going to go over the whole thing, the wood part and also the inlay part on top, the ceramic part on top, because this is actually going to lay down a little bit of a barrier for my next step, which is going to be this DIY dark wax. So here again, I'm not completely covering the whole thing. I am just using my finger and a little brush and moving that around strategically. And because that Jolie wax is on there, it made it easy to kind of feather that out with my finger. I just go back in with the brush just to kind of smooth everything out and meld everything together to give it a finishing look. I'm measuring the back of this just so I can add some little hooks on the back to hang up. So since I'm not hanging them long ways, I need to re-establish those hooks in a different location. And that's how they turned out. I was really happy with these. I felt like the inlays came out really nice and bold, you know, and I was really happy with the end result. So Project 5 is an Italian-inspired wall sconce. I got 2 of these actual prints from Facebook Marketplace a long time ago, and I used them like this for a while, but since I've kind of grown out of them, so I just decided that I was going to upcycle them. So the first thing I'm going to do is grab my paper clay, and I'm gonna place a border around these the frame of this just to give it some dimension and to kind of spruce it up a little bit. I believe I'm using the IOD Laurel and Rosette molds on the outer frame of this. And you guys have all seen me make molds 100 times. You know, you just want to make sure that you're dusting it with some cornstarch or something to get that clay out easier. Once I've kind of established a pattern that I like, I just go ahead and finish up my frame, and then I'm going to glue that all down with the Titebond. Making sure that I'm gluing this all down. I don't want any real spaces there. I want to make sure that everything is glued down really tight because of the next steps that I'm going to take. I want to make sure that it has really good adhesion. I did let that dry overnight, and then I went in and got some plaster of Paris. This is 2 scoops to 1 scoop of water. It's 2-to-1 ratio. I mixed that up. And while it's still kind of on the thinner side, you do need to work fast with this because it will thicken up quite a bit really quickly. So I'm just using a brush and I'm going over all of the picture part of this, which is more like a fabric. It's on like a fabric on there, and I just went over the whole thing and then did a couple of coats of that, making sure that I got a lot of texture. I changed my brush into a chip brush because you'll ruin your brush and I realized this, and so I used a different brush and went over also the outer layer of that, making sure that I didn't kind of cover up that detail of those molds too quickly. I did all of this, but then I ended up realizing that this was not the direction I wanted to go. I was gonna actually sand it down and let that color show through, but I decided to go in a different direction. So I grabbed my vintage linen and I just started to paint the whole thing to kind of give me a start, you know, like get me back to zero. So I grabbed my gilding wax, and what I'm going to do is just take my finger and go over the molds around the frame to highlight that. Then I'm going to grab my Chateau paint inlay, And I'm going to use this. I only need one sheet because it fits perfectly inside of this frame. And what I'm going to do is use an old one that I've already used once or twice because I don't want it to be really stark. I'm going for a really antique look here. So you can see where I've tried to like sand it and then decided it's because you could see some of that color going through, but it doesn't matter because those colors match the Chateau inlay. I used a lot of the same colors, so I didn't bother to kind of, and I was going to paint it anyway to put the inlay down in, so I just didn't worry about it. So I set that down and I sprayed it, and I really worked to get this inlay pressed down well. I wanted a lot of that color to show through on the inlay, so I took my time and I really pressed it down. I did use my heat gun to go over this, but I also did let it sit overnight, and so when I came back to it later, I don't think I let it sit overnight. I think I let it sit several hours, maybe overnight. I don't remember, but when I came back to it, it was completely dry. I pulled it off and I was not happy. I wanted more color. So I took the same inlay that I used. I actually cut it apart so that I could strategically put color where I wanted it. So I was kind of designing my own inlay, if you will. So I used that liquid patina and I put that in places. I didn't want to use paint because I didn't want to cover up what I already had there. So the liquid patina dries clear, so you were going to be able to see what had been laid down already, and that was my reasoning for this. So I laid the inlays down where I wanted them, sprayed them with water and pressed them down, and then I let those dry 20 minutes or so, not too long, because if you let it go, it's a little bit harder to get those inlays out when you use something like liquid patina or the big top. So I didn't let it dry way overnight. So 20 minutes was the max for me, and then I went back and I wet those down and pulled them off. And with this one, I got some really good transfer, some really good color, and I was happy with this. Once I got that all pulled off, I went in with my my big top and water in the spray bottle, the 50-50 mix, and I just went ahead and sprayed all through there using a paintbrush, like I said, just to kind of blend that out. And I'm not really swiping, I'm just kind of dabbing, and then I use my heat gun to kind of dry that up where I want it. So I'm going to let that sit, and then I'm going to go over to this little candle holder wall sconce thing that I got from the Goodwill several months ago, and I'm going to take it all apart so that way I could paint it easier. And with my vintage white, I'm going to go over all of the wood parts, not the metal gold part you see sitting there, but just the wood areas. I did 2 coats on these little wooden pieces and let those dry. I didn't use baking soda or anything. I just used straight paint on this. I didn't want a whole lot of texture with that. So once those were drying, I did grab my rub and buff in the gold leaf. And even though this is a gold, the gold leaf is a little bit brighter gold, and I like this kind of gold color better. So I just went ahead with my finger and went over all of that area. Then once everything was kind of cured and dried, I put everything back together and then grabbed a wet paper towel, and I'm just gonna wet distress this. Nothing major, just kind of going over the highlighted areas or the raised areas, and just kind of you know, wet distressing it, but not doing anything very major with it. Once I have that wet distress back to where I want it, I do grab the Jolie finishing wax, and I'm going to go over those little wooden areas. And that's just still in that paint. The gold part didn't need it. That Rub and Buff has a really nice finish on it, so I wasn't really worried about going over that. Once I have those covered over, then I'm going to grab the antiquing wax, and this is the one that I've just kind of been using through all these projects. It's kind of just dried, and then I put a little bit more water in it. So just using my finger, I'm just putting that where I want and then wiping it back with a paper towel. Grabbing my Rub and Buff again and the gold leaf, I'm just going to use my finger and I'm going to highlight the high ridges on the little wooden areas. And that's how that looked. I am really happy with the way this turned out. This is big enough and it's substantial enough that you could put one. You don't really need a pair, although I do have another one and I'm thinking about doing it the same, but kind of curious to do something a little bit different, so we'll see where I go from there. I hope y'all like this as much as I do. I was just so happy with the way that it turned out. Project 6 is what I call Botanical Wicker Decor. Everybody has 500 of these little picnic paper plate holders that we all got because everybody was doing stuff with them. So I had a bunch left over and I just wanted to get it out of my stash. I came up with an idea of a way to use them, starting out with my plaster of Paris, and I'm going to mix some of that up again with the ratio 2:1. 2 parts plaster to 1 part water. I'm gonna let this sit a little bit longer just for it to thicken up because I don't want it to completely glide through those spaces in the wicker. This is going to get pushed down into the wicker, so it'll hold on very easily, but it's just not going to be so soupy that it's just going to kind of drip through there. So I'm just using a palette knife to spread that all through, and I'm going to do this for all of the ones that I have. This one right here, you'll see this plate. I actually was using this as an experiment and I covered it with some paper mache, which I did not like. Using the paper mache, and you can see the difference in color. It turned really yellow. I think it was because there was so much water in the paper mache that it took forever to dry. So I just decided to go in a different direction and use the plaster of Paris. So I just used that plaster of Paris and went right over that paper mache. And just so you know, if your plaster is too kind of like lumpy and rigidy, you can actually sand that down. It sands down very easy. My next step is I'm gonna use this antiquing wax, and I'm going mixed with a little bit of water, and I'm gonna stain the outer part of 3 of these little paper plate trays that I've done. I have several, but I'm just going to use 3 and decorate these in the same kind of way. So just staining the outer part of that little basket. I actually went around the back and stained all of that as well and let that dry. Then I grabbed my vintage linen again and in the DIY, and I'm going to grab another inlay from that new inlay pack, and I'm going to use the 3 botanical prints that I have here and apply those to the inner part of that little basket on the plaster. So I did this for all 3 little baskets that I had, that I stained the wicker part, and I applied all those and then I let them dry completely. Once they were dry, I went in with my spray bottle and just wet those and pulled those back. With all the inlays, any inlays you know, you want to save those because they're good for multiple uses, so I just set those aside. I did go in with Big Top mixed with the water in my spray bottle, and I coated those with 2 good coats just to keep that inlay in place. Once that was dry, I did go in with my Jolie finishing wax, and because I want to antique this, I do want to put a barrier between that and the antiquing wax. So putting down a clear coat of wax is going to allow you to move that antiquing wax around. It's also going to seal that in and also seal that wicker up for you as well, so it kind of doesn't look dry and brittle. It looks nice and lush and you know, it looks good. It doesn't look like something that's about to fall apart. So that wax actually did that. So once I got all that coated, I just went in again with the antiquing wax, and I put that on, and then I used a paper towel to push that back. So if you have a lot of these sitting around, here's an idea for you to kind of use those up and get them out of your stash if you're kind of stumped about what to do with them. I know they were in kind of the crafting fad for a while and they've kind of died out, but you know, we can bring them back this way and get some use out of them. So project 7 is a French inspo perfume plaque, which you're going to start out the same way, and I used 3 of the wickers covered with the plaster of Paris, but this time I'm going to use these little perfume stencils from Jamie Ray Vintage, and I'm going to use some embossing gel. This embossing gel is actually from a different line, and this is the first time using it. I will say that I'm really happy with this. In fact, I can't remember the name of the line, but all the products that I've actually used from this line is phenomenal. They're really great products, and I don't really see people using them, and I'm not sure why. I just don't know if they're not familiar with it or what, but I've used some other products and I really like them. So anyway, I just put the stencil down, went over it with this embossing gel. It kind of works like plaster or something, but it's a little bit thinner and easier to spread out. So once I laid that down, I pulled the stencil up and then let those dry. You don't want to be heavy-handed when you're moving that around because you don't want that getting underneath the stencil. Once that was dry, I coated that with some clear wax, and then I'm going to go in with my DIY dark wax, and I'm going to push that into all of those little grooves around the raised stencil area just to kind of highlight and bring that forward. And then again, using the clear wax to kind of move that dark wax around, I decided to get some gold gilding wax, and I'm just going to rub over the top of that raised area to kind of bring that forward a little bit more. And to be honest, I still wasn't happy with it. I just felt like it was kind of fading out into the background still. So I grabbed my antiquing wax and water mixture, and I just used that to kind of push that down into those raised areas, and you can see here that you can see them a little bit better. And I did that for all 3. I was very happy with these as well. I just felt like that whole stencil with the little embossing gel going over it just gave a unique look to this. Project 8 is another version of this. This one is a little bit easier. So I just grabbed my last little wicker plaster basket, and again I grabbed my vintage linen paint, and I'm just kind of doing a heavier than dry brush over the basket on the outside, but coating the inside. Again, I grabbed my stain, and I'm going to stain this square. This comes in a pack from the dollar store, so I'm just staining that, and I'm wiping it back. I did use some liquid patina on this one to coat it, and I gave it a couple of good coats with that, letting dry between each coat. Here you kind of see me laying the plaque down, and because this is an uneven surface, I kind of grabbed the highest surface on there and I'm marking it so that way when I lay my wax down, I'm not gonna put it over that area, because I want to make sure that when I use my glue that wax is not gonna stop it from adhering. So I go over it all with clear wax, avoiding that little spot I made, and then I'm grabbing my antiquing and water mixture, and I'm just going to then apply that, not very dark. Again, since it has that clear wax, I'm able to kind of move that around and do kind of blend it out where I want to. I'm putting it on the plaster area as well as on the basket around. So I grab another transfer that I just had there that was extra, and I put it on the plaque, and I'm applying that plaque to the plaster area, and I'm just using my glue gun for this. Then I'm going to use liquid patina again, and I'm going to coat the top of that little wood piece. So I hope you all liked my projects for today. I was really happy that I was able to use up all these little baskets that I had in my stash. Thank you so much for watching. All the support that I've been getting over the last several months have been just so much appreciated. And if you haven't, please go over to my website, check it out, look at everything that I post. And any of these projects that you're interested in are actually for sale over there. And don't forget, if you haven't subscribed, please do check out all of our social platforms and subscribe and thumbs up to all of that. And we will see you next time.